Welcome back, everybody, to this edition of the Big East Rewind. I am Chuck Everson, your 7-foot host from Villanova, and my co-host, as always, is the Cavity Cape Crusader, the Root Canal royalty, the doctor himself, Sonny Spera, Dr. Sonny Spera. How are you, Sonny?
I tell you, Halloween just passed, right? That's my favorite holiday, man.
You could have went as the Cavity Cape Crusader for Halloween, Sonny. I would have liked to see you like with a big tooth and a Batman.
I was just thinking that's why you kind of slipped up a little bit. I think that was why.
I did. I saw some kind of weird, vibes coming from your dental office and some of the people. All your folks there were all in the spirit of the holiday. I know that because you had everybody dressed up, and that must have been something having people come in there to get their teeth worked on. And there's Squidward. There's a couple of witches. There was some football player that looked a little bit like you, suspiciously.
Yeah,
that's always fun.
Hall of Famer, man.
That's always fun. Yeah. So today we got another Boston College Eagle. These guys have been very elusive, Sonny. It's been very difficult getting the Eagles to come into the rewind.
Hard to get the Eagles to land. That's right.
That's a great way to put. Very good, Sonny. See
that? Like that?
That was good. I do like that. That was
you work on your intros. I'm working on the Eagle has landed.
Very good. That might have been used somewhere before, but that's okay. We're all right. I'm all right with it. So today we have a guard coming in, Sonny. So you should be very happy.
Yep.
No bigs today. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So today our guest was a high school All-American at Wayland High School in Wayland, Massachusetts. He played college basketball, as we said, for the Boston College Eagles in the early '80s, beginning of the Big East. He was there for the whole beginning of the conference. We're going to talk to him about that. He was an assistant at several schools, including Yale, BC, and Rhode Island. And he was the head coach at Ohio and Bryant, and now currently is the head coach of Naval Academy Prep in Newport, Rhode Island. My main man, Tim Shea. How are you, Tim?
Good, Chuck.
Can we call you Timmy? Is that too bad?
That's fine. Whatever you want. That's fine with me.
That's what I remember you back in the day, man.
My mother always called me Timmy, so that's fine.
All right. I remember we played you. That was a scouting report. Timmy O'Shea. We had to kind of I had to keep an eye on you because you were my position.
Yeah. So Sonny, actually, we were trying to find it. Sonny has a photo of you guarding Sonny or Sonny guarding you.
Oh, really? I'd like to see that.
You guys were playing.
Yeah, I was guarding you. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we got to dig that out of the archive. So I'm sure our guys will find that though. But we'll put that on when we get it. So we do our due diligence here, Tim. I don't know how much you know about us, but we do our due diligence. We are what is called, Sonny, what do we call it again?
Professional journalists.
Professional journalists is what we're called. So that said, we go through, we spare no expense in, getting all down to the bottom line to find out all little things about guys, okay? And we picked up a fun fact about Tim O'Shea. Okay, so you got to confirm or deny what this fact. Right. Were you a roommate of Doug Flutie's at Boston College?
Well, he lived in our suite where there were, 3-bedroom. Yeah, so Doug lived in there. So yeah, that's true. I was a senior. Doug was a junior.
So that was before he threw the pass to Phelan, right?
That would have been his senior year. So I was at that point a grad assistant down at the University of Rhode Island with Brendan Malone, who sadly just passed away.
Yeah. That's right. Very sad.
Wow. So that would have been too bad you missed that by a year, Tim. That would have been Bedlam coming back. Your sweet mate did that. And that would have been great.
There was always, even before I left that junior year when I was a senior, Doug had already, next to Larry Bird, he was probably the biggest, most popular athlete in Boston at that point.
We got to ask you a question everybody wants to know. Boxers or briefs, Doug Flutie?
I can't remember. You're going back a lot of years. All I know is that he was a great roommate, very quiet, very humble guy. A lot of the weekends he would just go home. He lived nearby in Natick, and his girlfriend was from there, and his family was there. He was not a guy that was out late at night. Loved sports, loved basketball, loved golf. He always seemed to be doing something in the off-season athletic. And
he liked his Flutie Flakes, right? Because when he went to Buffalo, man, he turned it on. I'm a huge Bills fan, so
Yeah, no, he had some great moments in NFL, and obviously in Canada he was a legend. And what he did for Boston College, that was sort of a golden era for
Right.
football when he came on the scene. The greatest Doug Flutie story that I know was the fact that um, living in the same apartment before Doug moved in, one of my roommates came back and was talking about this Flutie kid was a pretty good prospect. He was a freshman then, a true freshman. Um, but he only got to go on the Penn State trip. He was a last minute ad to travel with the team. And he got into the fourth quarter basically as a fourth string quarterback. And there was a lot of talk he was going to move to like a defensive back in the spring because he was a good athlete. And he had that one great drive. And next thing you know, he's in the starting lineup, and the rest is history. But he was one of the last kids. He may have been the last kid in that recruiting class to get a scholarship. Jack McNeil had come on board. Some kids left, and I believe Scott Gieselman was the last, and he became a kid that got drafted. Doug was the second to last kid in that recruiting class to be offered a scholarship. He was going to go play at Brown, I believe, where his brother had played. And it's amazing, a few years later, he ends up winning the Heisman Trophy. Just incredible.
Yeah.
You know who
Recruiting
credits
story.
him? Credits him for coming to Boston College is Dana Barros.
I don't
Dana
know the
was
story.
he was visiting.
He had Dana on, and he said he was
Yeah.
going there on a football visit, right?
Okay.
Justin? And then turns out he winds up playing hoops there and has a great career. Went on to play in the NBA for a lot of years.
Oh, yeah.
just-
So Dana credited Doug for him coming to BC.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played some
Yeah,
pickup
but-
with them in the
I
Robert
was a
Center.
I was a grad assistant when Dana was recruited by Gary. They didn't offer him till late in the state tournament, because he was small. He's only about 5'10", put up unbelievable numbers. But Dana, he wasn't heavily recruited. Another story of a guy that kind of flew under the radar. That BC ended up taking him, and he was good from day one. I was a grad assistant when Dana was a freshman, and again in hindsight, it's crazy that he didn't have more offers, but he was not heavily recruited.
Yeah,
And
He
wound
said-
up being a big time scorer too.
Boy, a pro. I mean,
Yeah.
10-year plus pro. BC had a run of guys, undersized, under-recruited guys that went on to have tremendous pro careers. Michael Adams, John Bagley, bigger guy, Jay Murphy, Doug Flutie in football, on and on and on. So it was really incredible when you look back on it.
So enough about talking about your roommate. We know you.
Yeah.
Doug Flutie.
Yeah.
Doug Flutie's
Yeah.
sitting around somewhere saying that he was Tim O'Shea's roommate.
Yeah.
So
That's right. Yep.
right. So okay. So let's get into it. So you were a high school All-American in Wayland. Okay. And you played. You and your brother were on the same team. Your younger brother,
Yeah, my brother Tom, sure.
Tommy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and talk about what that was like playing with your brother. I played with mine, and I know we had it kind of built up a bond that was already strong, made it a little stronger by playing on the
Sure.
same.
Yeah.
Bro.
Tom ended up playing at the University of Vermont, had a good career coaching for a number of years. It was great. It was a great time. You look back, Wayland was a nice town to grow up in. Had a very good high school coach who's since passed away, Joe Perrell. You mentioned Russ Doherty off there. We were talking a little bit. Russ was from the same town. So we're a town of about 10,000 people. They have three guys who go on to play Division I basketball. It's pretty unusual. And great. It was, some great memories. Again, I think we all look at, I'm 62 now. I don't know how old you guys are, but it's just amazing how quickly time passes.
Yeah, it is.
But that was a great time in our lives. It really was.
Now-
High school and obviously a lot of our college experiences when we look back. We didn't always appreciate them as we probably should have.
Now, Tom was a real tough guy, right?
Yeah.
He played with an affliction, and I believe
Yeah.
they named an award after him. At
Sure,
Vermont,
they did.
right?
Yeah, he had a club
Oh,
foot.
bad.
So it was
Really?
interesting. Yeah, my father got him golf. I never played golf when I was a kid, but he was concerned that Tom wouldn't really be able to find a sport because of the club foot. Wouldn't be able to play basketball, any sport required running. But he, was good enough with a club foot to get a Division I scholarship and really had a very solid career at UVM. Last year, he played for Tom Brennan, who went on to have a
great
lot of
coach,
success at
Yeah.
UVM. And they did name basically an award that's sort of for perseverance award. And that really fit Tom. A guy got the most out of his ability.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
I wanted to ask you about that. I heard all about that.
Yeah.
But that was great, man.
Tim, in your high school days, did you were you in the Patrick Ewing? Like, was that
Yeah.
that something
Patrick-
going on? That because he
Sure.
was such a phenom in the country. So
Patrick was a year behind me, and that was at the very beginning of this whole what would become AAU.
Mhm.
Leo Papil, who's still very prominent on the AAU circle, had a team of Boston kids, and the backcourt was me and Carl Hobbs, who obviously has been
Oh
coaching, had
yeah,
a good career
sure.
at
UConn.
UConn.
Yep.
UConn. Mhm.
Yeah, Ewing was our center. I remember a kid by the name of Paul Little went to UPenn and had a really good career at Penn. Trying to think who else was now going back, but those were the main guys. And we'd had a game against like the Russians. Leo put together. In AAU, there was AAU, but it was more regional. And the team we couldn't get by was the team from Washington, D.C. with Derek Wittenberg and Sidney Lowe. And they had
Yes.
a front court guy by the name of Earl Jones, who was a huge name. But we played in these little obscure gyms with maybe 20, 30 people in the stands. Nothing like what exists today. As you both know, the big thing back in those days, if you wanted to get recognized and get recruited, you had to go to 5-star camp.
Right.
And if you played well at 5-star, that's where you'd really get recruited. Mike Jarvis was actually the assistant coach on that team with Leo. Well, Leo, they were co-coaches.
Mhm.
We had a kid, Martin Clark, too, who played at BC, was a good
Sure.
player.
Number
Trying some of the
33.
names.
He's a
Yeah,
pretty good
John-
player too, Tim.
Felton Sealy. There was
That
a
elbow
good,
jump shot, man.
a core group of guys back then. But again, it was not anywhere near as organized and structured as things are today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Derek Wittenberg was on the show, and he talked about playing you guys and playing Patrick and stuff. It's
Yeah,
funny you
yeah.
mentioned his name.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Nobody would forget Patrick in those days. It was clear he was going to be an NBA player. The first time I saw Patrick, because we'd heard about this kid in Cambridge who was a 6'9", 6'10", eighth grader, saw him over at the Shelburne Center in Roxbury. And back then he was so skinny, but you could see the athleticism, but he had no endurance. He'd go up and down the court 2-3 times and be exhausted. And I thought he got a big break when having Mike Jarvis as a high school coach, because Mike was really he was a great great level coach for a high school kid, and he really guided Patrick through the recruiting process and everything else. And Patrick obviously had a ton of natural talent, but having such an exceptional high school coach like that, I think made a big difference in his development.
Did you ever play against a Pete Wynn at Beverly, a teammate of mine?
Pete Wynn? I remember the name probably at some point so long ago.
Yeah,
Now.
he was kind of under the radar too, and then I remember
I remember
recruited
the
him.
name. No, I remember the name,
Yeah.
and
I don't know if that's like your leagues, if you guys played each other at all.
who's a guy you might know. Yeah, I think you around your era, Sean Cairns.
Oh yeah, he's my teammate in high school.
He's in Newport now. He's around here. He's done well.
He has a place there. Yes, he does.
Yeah, he's done well. It's funny looking back on that whole. I visited Syracuse, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So you would have been in.
Danny Shays and Leo Routens were my hosts.
Okay.
And I had a good time up there. Yeah. It might have been, had I known BC was going to have Bagley and Adams, probably the Q's might have been a better landing spot. But
there you go.
No, I enjoyed it. Enjoyed the Q's.
So who else? In speaking of recruitment, what were some of the other schools that? Because you're an All-American, so you are on the radar of a lot of schools. Talk about who's coming after Tim O'Shea.
Well, no, I visited Stanford, Tennessee, Davidson. Yeah, Stanford I initially committed to Stanford, then I backed out just because it was so far from home. And back then, people weren't as caught up in the name of schools. But I did visit Harvard, but I had to pay to go to Harvard because they had no athletic scholarships.
Yep.
And I liked Stanford because that was a full ride at basically a Harvard. And you sometimes wonder what could have happened maybe. But those are the main ones. I visited Tennessee, Syracuse, Davidson, Harvard. Yeah, and then I never really took an official visit to BC. And after I backed out of Stanford, that just was close to home. My father had gone there. Obviously, a good coach in Tom Davis. My timing might have been just a little off, with Bagley and Adams. But I still played a lot the first couple of years, had a couple of knee injuries. But overall, again, somebody wanted to be a coach, to play 2 years for Tom Davis and 2 years for Gary Williams, and then eventually become Gary's grad assistant was a pretty good education in itself.
I want to ask you about Dr. Tom Davis, right? Because he was very innovative, I think, at the time,
right?
And like a coach's coach, right? So, what was recruitment like with him, and then what was it like playing for him?
Well, interestingly, he and Gary Williams Gary had been his assistant for a long time.
Right.
And Davis was very big on his system, the pressure defense, the flex and all that, which, was somewhat restrictive, quite honestly, if you're a player. It was very effective in terms of winning basketball games. But, I thought Gary was more of a player's coach in terms of a guy like Michael Adams was going to do better playing for Gary. We had a little bit more freedom. Whereas Tom Davis, and I'm not knocking, they were both great coaches, was very, that system was very structured. There was no shot clock. I mean, we'd throw 40 bounce passes before we'd shoot the ball. It was all based on a lot of it was based on getting to the free throw line and just wearing a team down with cut after cut after cut, which was effective. But in hindsight, you might, playing for Boeheim or some other coaches where you could play a little bit more would probably appeal to the player in most of us, as opposed to being in a system. And Williams was much more, I thought, of a player's coach, but they were both excellent in their own way.
I was just going to ask you, kidding around with you, where did you learn how to not shoot the ball when you were open?
Well, that was a big part.
That was into the post, right?
Yeah, that was Davis. It was a very disciplined, restrictive system, and you could get a little robotic. Just the way to be honest about it.
How many guys had the green light from 15 feet?
Not many, because back then there was no 3-point line.
But, 15, like the elbows. That's like Martin Clark was like money.
A little bit. But Davis, you know how BC played back then. You just keep turning it over. It was okay. Again, I think the 3-point line, the shot clock have all been really good for the game. And it's hard for kids. Even think about, remember the first 3-point line, how close it was?
Yeah, inside the top
ridiculous.
of the key.
It was
basically
absurd.
Top of the key, right?
Yeah. And give Pitino credit. He was Pitino was the first one to really say, hey, we're going to totally take advantage of this. Yeah. And that was a big part of the Providence success.
Billy Donovan,
Yeah. So, it was just the way, you played. You played in the system, you bought into it, and that's how you did it. Where it's Bagley just kind of was so talented. He could score inside and outside. So I guess he had a little bit of a green light.
He was also so physically strong.
Right.
Like people don't understand.
Yeah.
You could not move him off his spot.
No.
You look at him, you'd be like, he's not that quick. And he's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But he'd have been a hell of a football player, too.
Well, he could dunk a basketball easily. And he weighed over 200 pounds at about maybe 6 foot, 6'1". And the other thing, as I said, the most incredible thing about John, the 50-50 balls in a scrum or whatever, John got 98% of them. He just had those incredibly strong hands.
Yeah.
So he was tremendous in the flex. He also was the type of guy that you got down the stretch. Was just a total go-to guy in college. I think he was the MVP of the Big East, if I'm not mistaken, his junior year, and then he turned pro and he went in the first round, and had a great career. I think he played 13 or 14 years. Mm-hmm. And Michael Adams did the same thing. I think he made an all-star game at one point, played 10. So those some really, really good guards. We had another guy, Dominic Presley, who you probably remember.
Lightning.
Yeah, he passed away in his early 30s.
Yeah.
It was very sad. And we had a lot of talent. Jay Murphy played in the NBA. John Garris played in the NBA.
John was a big, strong guy, too.
Yeah, I think Dominic Presley made a team for a little while. So we had a lot of guys that would go on and play. You play in the NBA for a minute, you got to be a hell of a player.
What was practice like? Talk about practice with those guys.
Williams and Davis were very similar in that most of practice was going live. We'd press, we'd go up and down. There wasn't a lot of, drilling. It was more we played.
Really?
Yeah, we pressed. And
you would think they would break that offense down and constantly work.
Maybe early on we did, but once we got going, it was just repetition, competition, up and down. I like practice because it went quick. It wasn't a lot of, you weren't bored with a lot of repetition. Gary was very much up and down, and practices weren't overly long. I think we're usually an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. By the end of the year, maybe an hour, a little over an hour. They were quick, but they were high intensity.
When you finally made your decision, Tim, to go to BC,
yeah,
and I know you talked about the coaches and that played a part into it. Did you take into consideration that this was a brand new conference? There was a lot of changes going on at the time because it started in 79, right? You came in 80. It had 1 year So did that come into?
Nah, not really. It was close to home. It was close to home. My father had gone to school there. Like I said, I was originally going to go out to California to Stanford, and it just made sense. They had recruited me for years. I knew a lot of people at the school. I used to go over there and play pickup all the time. It's probably the place I felt most comfortable, you know, and that had more to do with it than anything else. I knew the Big East was a good league, but nobody really knew for sure what it was going to become. We still played in Little Roberts Center. Villanova played in their little gym, whatever that was called. Seton Hall, same thing. At the end, there was a stage.
Walsh gym.
It was fine. They were just starting to put games on TV back then. It was totally different. It was more about being close to home.
ESPN is in your backyard, so does that come into factor at any point? Like, are they like, hey, let's go talk to our local Division I teams, which is there's you guys, there's right, there's
maybe
not a lot, right?
I'm sure the coaches, administrators were thinking about that, but kids like myself that we weren't giving it that much thought. BC was a good school, it was close to home, and they recruited me hard, and I did get a pretty good opportunity to play. And then I had some injuries, and Michael obviously blossomed into a star. And I had a decision: do you transfer, or do you stay? And I thought about it, but then I decided to stay. In hindsight, I'm glad I did, because I really enjoyed playing for Gary Williams. I think I learned a lot. He gave me a chance to be his grad assistant. And, for somebody who wanted to be a coach, having an opportunity to start, but also having to be a backup wasn't the worst experience in the world, because then you get a sensitivity for all the roles you play on a team. We don't look, we could all say, had we gone to X school, we would have been stars in hindsight, but that just isn't always how it played out. And we all got to play for great coaches, whether Rowley or Boeheim. Myself, 2 great coaches, and we took away some relationships. And also, let's face it, in terms of life lessons, sometimes facing a little adversity or some adversity when you're young isn't the worst thing in the world either.
No,
as you get older,
that's when somebody's character comes out. That's when you find out what kind of person you are, is when during times of adversity.
Well, and you have to fight through it sometimes and struggle through the disappointment or whatever, and just pivot, figure some things out. So I think it's helped me as a coach over the years dealing with kids, and I'm very sensitive. I always said the hardest thing for me was a coach sometimes, having a kid who worked really hard, was a good player. You might have recruited hard, and you just couldn't get him on the floor because you just happened to have a guy at his position was a little bit better. And that was tough. I remember at Ohio, I had a kid who was Mr. Basketball in Minnesota. Greatest kid you could ever want, good student. But at his particular position, there was always a guy who was just better. And so his opportunities were limited. Just the way we all know how that goes. We can all think of teammates.
Especially the 2 of us, we know how it goes.
Yeah, well, no, we all
Sonny
know.
and I both know that all too well.
Yeah, a guy named Pearl Washington came in. That changed my whole landscape.
Well, Sonny used to be a 6'5" point guard, Timmy.
Well,
now
I remember
6'5" shooter.
Yeah, I had to move to shooting guard or not play at all, right?
Well, I remember looking at Syracuse and people were saying, well, they're going to recruit over you and get this guy or that guy. Well, they weren't going to get any guys better than Bagley and Adams, as it turned out, really. I mean, they had good players, obviously, but so you never know.
Truth is, though, any Division I school is always looking to get better players and get better. So it's just a fact of competition.
Yeah, and sometimes, you're in the right place at the right time, and sometimes you're not. Doug Flutie's a great example. Doug was so close to being moved to a defensive back, and an opportunity came his way, and obviously he seized it. But there are plenty of guys that, the moment doesn't come. And the hardest thing as a college athlete is if you start to lose a little bit of confidence, or you've got to play a limited role. So you can kind of, there's a lot of luck involved in a great career, a great coaching career, a great playing career. Do you stay healthy? All these, we both know that. But I think we all look back, as you do at Villanova and Syracuse and myself at BC. We're overall, I think we were all very fortunate.
At this point, we have a new sponsor to the show, and we want to welcome our good friend Peter Haber and Third Eye Consulting Property Management Systems. We'll be right back after we hear about Third Eye in less than 60 seconds.
Third Eye Consulting is the name you can trust when it comes to property management. Our good friend Peter Haber runs Third Eye Consulting. Whether you're a landlord, an out-of-state homeowner, or an investor, Third Eye Consulting provides innovative property management solutions tailored just for you. They'll take the hassle out of property ownership and turn it into a profitable experience. They've done this for many others. Visit their website at thirdeyeconsultingllc.com to learn more.
So, okay, well, we're Facebook back. Group. Thanks for that, and thanks to our friend Peter Haber for sponsoring the Big East Rewind. Appreciate that. So, talk to us about this, Tim. You mentioned the Roberts Center. That was a home court advantage for you guys. That was one of the worst, toughest places to play as an opponent in the whole conference, man. I mean, especially if your last name was Presley and your first name was Harold. They killed Harold Presley in that play. Talk about what it was like playing in there and having that advantage.
Well, just what made it, one of the people that really made it a tough environment, believe it or not, was a student that joined Davis Found early on that wanted to sort of, as a marketing project, try to get tickets and build some enthusiasm. It was Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl came down, and he would run around the Eagles. He'd do anything he could to build up excitement. And so it got to a point when that place was packed. It was a tough place to get a win, just as Villanova and obviously the Carrier Dome and, the whole league were snake pits when the buildings were full. And Roberts Center, that floor was a little funky. It was like a rubber floor.
Yeah, that was
tough. It was.
It was different. But
and it had like the stands like on that pitch. You felt like you were in a pit.
It was a glorified high school gym. That's what it was.
The dome had that floor too, didn't it, Sonny?
It did. Then? The tartan rubber floor, brutal on your knees.
Floor, that killed you.
Brutal on your knee, had to be.
Did you practice on it every day?
We practiced at Manley Fieldhouse for a while, and that had the same tartan floor.
Right.
And it was, but it was a little bit softer in Manley because in the dome it was just flat out on top of concrete. I mean,
I don't understand why everybody didn't have a nice wooden floor. But we had that crappy rubber floor. Well, Villanova, you had that, whatever that gym. What was that gym called? You guys played.
They called it the Cat House back then. Now it's called Jake Nevin. They named it after Jake, our trainer. Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
That was, when you think of you stepped on somebody's foot, that's how you knew you were out of bounds at that place. The band was on the stage on one end, and everybody was right on top of you. You had no place to go.
Yeah, the facilities back in those days was actually kind of funny when you think about it.
Yeah, And then Gavitt made them go all to the big. Then next thing you know, Boston
eventually they went to
the Garden. We're playing at the Spectrum. Sonny's still playing at the Dome, and that big monstrosity, the Dome. So,
Timmy, I gotta ask you a couple questions. In your playing days at BC, what are some of your memorable times and moments or stories about either opponents or visits or on the road stories kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I did host Patrick Ewing on his visit, but he was never going to go to BC. I think that he was always going to go to Georgetown. Nice guy. I think back, obviously, when Pearl hit that half-court shot, that was tremendous. Remember that? When they, off of this free...
you remember.
Martin Slack missed a free throw. And
Martin missed the rebound. Sean got the rebound, hit the Pearl, 1-2 dribbles up.
Yeah, and he just kept running, and then Gary Williams was crazy in the locker room, breaking a bunch of stools, and that was pretty funny.
It would have been overtime otherwise. It was a tight game.
I think my freshman year we had a crazy comeback. It might have been against Syracuse, was it?
Yeah, it was. Let's not go there.
Yeah, I remember that. No, I vaguely. Guys,
that was the Big East tournament. That was an utter collapse. That game, someone sent me it on YouTube or something. I didn't realize that we actually had a double-digit lead with like a couple minutes left.
Yeah, that's so long ago.
And we were running like there was a 20-second shot clock.
It was in Connecticut then. I think it was at Hartford.
It was in Hartford. Yeah, it was in Hartford.
And then it moved to Madison Square Garden.
Yep, that was the last year at a location not MSG. Yep.
Yeah, my freshman year we went to Sweet 16. Sophomore year we went to the Final 8. Now I'd hurt my knee that year, so I was, missed the last 20 games. I had to have knee surgery. We lost to Houston, Reed Geddes, but that was a very close game. And then Tom Davis would leave shortly thereafter to go to Stanford as a head coach, and then Gary came in. That first year we went to Sweet 16. Then our senior year we just didn't really click as well as we could have, and I think we went to the NIT. but 3 out of the 4 years were in the NCAA, which is pretty good.
And you
Now,
went far.
Murph was in your class, right? Jay was in your class, and
He was,
Clark, right?
Martin was in our class. He had a little, meltdown at the end there.
Had a little meltdown. Yeah, we heard.
Let's leave that alone. Yeah, I haven't seen Martin in 30 years, so I don't know what he's up to these days.
Did he play pro in England? Because he was from England, right?
Yeah, I never really, probably. I don't know.
I think he did.
I don't know. There was really not much
played out there. I remember playing against him out there, so I think he did.
I mean, that wasn't much of a league. I mean, it was barely, they called it pro, but, was nothing like what we would consider pro.
You're playing on an indoor-outdoor carpeted rug. You talk about playing in a tough spot, Timmy.
I mean,
it was like you were deaf. You couldn't hear the sneakers squeak. You couldn't hear the ball bounce. Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, anybody was any kind of college player at the Big East level could have gone to Europe back in those days if you wanted to go to one of those smaller countries and been, a great player if you wanted to. I always wanted to get into coaching, so I was fortunate to get a grad assistantship right away.
So let's go into that, because Sonny and I go over this topic time and time again. Big guys versus point guards as head coaches. The jobs always go to the point guards. We realize they're the floor generals, on the court, coach on the court.
Well, I mean, there were a lot. There are probably more guys that played point guard. That whole idea of coach on the floor,
right?
There's probably something to it.
Come on. Wait. Stop being so humble. Stop being so humble.
There are plenty of examples. Well, you got McDermott at Creighton. He's been a great coach.
Yes,
there's been plenty of guys. I mean,
not that many. Come on. Not that many.
The biggest thing, let's face it, today in college,
the guys are gone now. The last of the Mohicans was Patrick Ewing. Yeah. That was it. He was our last hope, and now he's done.
Well, let's face it, college basketball today, Tom Davis said to me years ago when he knew I wanted to coach, he goes, look, 75% of it is recruiting, and he's probably right. He said 10% is 10 to 15% scheduling, and about 10% of it's X's and O's. And I think he's correct. You got to have the players. You don't have the horses.
But that's a big number if you think about it.
No, but I think it's pretty accurate. I think we'd all agree. Yeah. I mean,
it's the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. I've always heard that. I don't disagree with that at all.
And scheduling is probably the biggest inequity when you're
it's funny you mention that. No one's ever mentioned that, but that is such a great point.
Well, if you coach at the mid-major or low-major level, and for example, at Ohio, we were pretty good. We had a pro by name Brandon Hunter. We had, unfortunately, just passed away. You can't get games if you're good at the mid-major level. Syracuse is a great example. Most of your non-conference games were always at home, and it allowed you to pile up 7, 8, 9, 10 wins, whatever, gain some confidence, don't have any travel fatigue, and then you go into conference play. What an advantage. So the smaller schools, you get to a small school like Bryant, the only source of revenue was probably a guarantee game. So you're starting the year 0-5, 0-6 because you got to bring in some money and you play those games. So the biggest inequity, I think, is the mid-major, low-major is definitely scheduling. Even if you're in a position where you say, oh, we're not going to play any money games, it's still hard to get decent home-and-home games if you're any good, if you're at a mid-level. So,
but money is such a big factor, though. Like you said it. You got games, and I don't know if people understand that. They call them money games, right?
Sure.
Where the lesser team is sort of the sacrificial lamb to the greater team. So you got,
for the most part,
Michigan's doing it. All the big schools are doing it, and they're looking for that, that confidence builder. But the school gets paid X amount of dollars, and I've heard some, where some coaches in their contracts will say, "Listen, if we take some of these money games or I get them, we're going to split some of that revenue. Part of that's going to be my salary, and part of that's going to go to school."
Yeah, they're all,
which is a smart thing.
It's whatever negotiated, but the holy grail of scheduling, I've always said, is winning a money game. So when I was at Ohio, we beat North Carolina for money at Carolina. We won at Maryland. At Bryant, we actually won at Boston College, and we won at, believe it or not, Denver. University of Denver, I think, gave us $75,000 per game. But that's, that doesn't happen very often. It's incredibly difficult to win a money game. And there's a reason for that. I mean, the other team's got their officials, their home court.
And nobody wants to ref that big upset. That's for sure.
No. If you're, you want to keep working at that level. your worst nightmare is when the small school's beating the big school, because you're getting paid very, very well to ref at the
Lemoyne
Power
beat
5 level.
Syracuse. Yeah.
What's that?
Lemoyne
Yeah.
beat Syracuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens every year, here and there. But percentage-wise, I think, a Power 5 school playing a bye game in basketball probably wins 97, 98% of the time. It's about a 2% chance. And if once you win one of those games, you're probably not getting another one. But it was pretty good at Ohio. Winning at Carolina and winning at Maryland, those were good ones.
Big time.
But it's hard to do, though. And you got to be lucky and you got to be good.
About recruiting. And I guess one of the biggest fish you caught, right, was Cuttino Mobley, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Talk about recruiting Cuttino and what that was like and how you got him.
Here's the truth about Cuttino. He was a throw-in. In other words, he was up at Maine Central. We had a good relationship with Max Good when I was at Rhode Island. We needed a point guard. They had a small point guard named Sean Colson. Sean wanted to go to school with Cuttino. Thought Cuttino was okay. We didn't think he was anything special. So we took him. And he also had to sit out a year academically under the old Prop 48 rules.
Right.
But we had no expectation. We were getting a great player. Again, a little bit lucky. And he kept getting better and better. And obviously, his senior year, and by then Jim Herrick was the coach, he exploded, became a second-round pick. And I think he got with the right team. Ended up in Houston with, I think it was Olajuwon and was it Sampson or Brock? I forget. But basically, Cuttino was in a situation where he would get a lot of open shots because of the double team. Come back out to him and he could shoot. He had good size. But trust me, nobody coming out of Maine Central felt that Cuttino Mobley was a future NBA player. Just one of those guys. He got better. It happens. And he was fortunate to be at Rhode Island. And I think, in some ways, the coaching change from Al to Herrick might have helped Cuttino a little bit, because Jim was a little more, Al was much more defensive oriented, whereas Cat was more, and Herrick was a little more offensive oriented. So,
talking about Al Skinner and Jim Herrick, folks.
But I was with Al for 13 years. It was great.
And then he was with you at Bryant, because I remember.
He came with me for a couple of years.
You guys had a hell of a staff up there. You had Happy Dobbs, who was a teammate of mine, and Al Skinner. I mean, I was like a little kid again, because Al was, of course, a big member of the New York Nets, that played on Long Island with Julius Erving and Sonny's favorite player, Super John Williamson at the time.
Super John.
So it was nice to be able to catch up with him.
Yeah.
Talk about working with those guys.
It was great. Happy Al, they were great. And we had a pretty good run. And then, unfortunately for us, we got hit with the transfer thing. You lose the leading scorer in the league and the Rookie of the Year league in, May. At that level, you don't replace those guys. And I always thought, to be good, you got to score 75, 80 points a game. You got to defend, but you got to be able to score. But when you lose that type of firepower, you just, such a thin margin. But, that's the whole transferring thing has really made the life of a college coach a lot more stressful, I think, at every level, because kids basically can be free agents, immediate eligibility. Now you throw in this NIL, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's no coincidence that Coach K and Jay Wright and Roy Williams and those guys all got out right within the same calendar year, basically. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it really is not policed the way it should be as far as some of these things. But I guess they're waiting to see how it plays out for a little while, and then they'll kind of set things up. But it's kind of like being on a pro team now.
Oh, no question. That's why teams are hiring general managers.
Villanova
Duke has one. Ed Cooley's got one at Georgetown now, but there's, I don't think it's sustainable. You got to raise the money every year. It's not tax deductible. You don't get any credit to the university for giving it. What do? You got a guy that's giving you a certain amount of money and you invest in a certain player. He doesn't play well. That guy's calling you up. And I mean, there's so many unintended consequences. So many, I don't know. I just don't think it's healthy. I thought, and I don't know if you guys agree, I thought getting to go to Boston College on a full scholarship, travel, play basketball, the free gear, live with regular students, go to class with everybody else,
Yeah.
I thought that was a healthy way and just a great deal. Now, that's not enough. I mean, I see kids posting pictures of the cars they're getting, showing their wrist with some watch. I think the value system's all screwed up. I just don't think it's healthy for the kids necessarily, and definitely not for the sport. I don't. That's just my
And
opinion.
the tough thing too, Timmy, is you have a culture like they have at Villanova
Yeah.
and other schools too
Right.
about family,
Right.
and we're gonna.
Right.
That stuff kind of goes out the window when you're
No
playing for your
question.
brand, and everybody's playing for the name on the back of the shirt instead of playing on the front. I mean, that's something I think has got to be very, very tough to control when you're a head coach, especially in a mid-major where you could lose your guys like that.
Think about it. Rhode Island, I saw URI preview of their team. 11 new players. You only have 13 scholarships.
Right.
St. John's, 11 new players. I mean, these are just mercenary teams thrown together, and half those guys will be back in the transfer portal in the spring, probably. Like I said, the culture, the sense of community, the sense of maybe fighting through a little adversity. I mean, transferring a guy said, I think it's true. There are good reasons to transfer. I know some guys would really benefit. Leo Routins was a transfer. We had John Garris at BC. Plenty of guys do it. But it is a form of quitting for certain kids. And if you have too many of those kids on your roster, I don't know. What's practice like?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just...
You know what's interesting, Tim? You talk about the transfer portal.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily go your way just because you go in the transfer portal.
No question.
If you had a scoring average, like Villanova picked up a kid from Kentucky. I think he was averaging 2 points a game and 2 boards.
Yeah.
Now you really have to do your homework to see, is he a 2-point player or is he somebody that maybe got the short end of the stick because he had somebody better in front of him or whatever. But, I mean, and you get guys like on the mid-major level that are scoring 15, 17 points a game at that level. They go to, say, the ACC or the Big East or something, and they're sitting on the bench and they're wondering what the heck happened. And you can't go back. And some guys go in and don't even get picked. Now what do you do? Now they don't talk about those guys. I mean, you think, okay, I'm just going to leave. The coach is yelling at me. I can't. Listen, if Sonny and I left because we'd be gone any team we played on. We played for two of the best yellers ever to coach.
Yeah.
But if you got didn't have tough skin and you wanted to get in the portal and get out, who's to say that where you go next is going to be any better?
And I think that a lot of coaches are pushing kids in that portal. They want to get rid of the kids. They end up, not getting anything. It's I don't know. It's a different world. I don't think it's for the better. My experience with transfers is interesting. Over the years, the kids that worked out the best were kids coming from smaller schools that had done well that came up. The guys that transferred from the big name schools down, most of them didn't work out because psychologically, at some point in their career, somebody said, you're good enough to play at Louisville or Auburn or whatever. Now you're at Ohio U or say at Bryant or whatever. They're a little mentally, something's not quite right. They've lost something. And they tend to be bitter. None of those guys worked out. But the guys coming from the smaller schools, we had a kid from Columbia, Holy Cross, worked out great for me at Bryant. I had, I'm trying to think, a couple smaller school kids at Ohio. But those guys that came down, I had a kid from BC, a kid from Auburn, didn't work out at all.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting trend. But I also always would feel for the coach. I remember years ago, Bruiser Flint lost his best player to Louisville. Yeah. Well, so the next year, Bruiser's out of a job because, he lost his 18, 20 point a game score at Louisville, and nobody understands the consequences for that coach who loses that guy who he gave the opportunity to, developed under his watch, and all of a sudden he's gone. Because it's much harder to replace talent at the low level, mid level.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, Coach, and this is something that is not really discussed that much either. Once you recruit a guy, let's use Sonny as an example. You recruit Sonny. Now you think back when we were playing, Sonny's with you for 4 years. Okay.
Right.
Now you get Sonny, okay, and Pearl comes in or whoever else comes in.
Right.
But now you got to constantly be recruiting Sonny if you want to keep him on the team. You can't stop recruiting even though he's part of the team. I mean that's got to be a full-time job.
It also comes down to the individual. At BC, I certainly could have gone elsewhere. I'd started enough games, whatever. At the end of the day, to me, it made sense to stay and and just play your role and hope you get an opportunity.
How do you think you would have handled? How do you think you would have handled How do you think you would have handled the social media part of it, Coach?
As a coach, I mean, you just try to educate the kids to be smart about what they post because it lives forever. The screenshot or whatever. In a moment of frustration or whatever, you would hope that the young person would be wise enough not to put something up that they would later regret. There was something the other day. I think Pittsburgh had a bad loss in football, and they kind of took out of context something the head coach said. You guys follow that at all? And so all of a sudden, the football guys were reposting it. Basically, the guy was saying, we haven't done a good enough job recruiting players. We need to get better players. But he said a lot more. If you took it in context, it wasn't, it was really not. He basically put it on himself. But my point is, social media is just another point of stress for coaches and for athletic directors in schools.
And for young adolescents too. It's a tough time in your life to deal with all that background noise that at one time is very supportive and then at another time turns on a dime.
No, it's created another
crazy,
another stressor.
Yeah,
for everybody to deal with, which is cell phones. Hey, remember we used to go into a cafeteria. I noticed this at Bryant because a little further along in the social media thing. You used to go into a cafeteria at Ohio. Be a very noisy place, Boston College, whatever. You go in any university cafeteria these days, it's very quiet. Yeah. Every kid's in a computer or on their phone. They're in a device. They're not talking to each other.
Right.
It's very common. That's why when I take a team overseas or something, you try to collect all the phones just so you could have some social interaction.
Yeah, and enjoy where you're at too.
Well, another stress for coaches, kids you're in a locker room, you're upset. You never know if somebody's got a phone on recording what you're saying.
Right.
I mean, it's everywhere. There's a camera everywhere nowadays. You got to assume one at least.
It's funny you say that.
My daughter's a psychologist now. I mean, you need to have somebody to talk to about some of this stuff. Because listen, we've all been on the end of it. You get booed or whatever. Different. That's different than 15,000 people telling you you're terrible and your family stinks and everything everything else that they say.
I know where you live.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. So unbelievable.
Yeah,
well, we're getting close to the end here, Coach.
Sure.
What would you tell a younger guy that is looking to get into coaching? You kind of knew at an early age that that's what you wanted to do. What would you tell somebody? What would you tell the young Tim O'Shea if he was?
Well, it would depend. Well, first off, it would depend. Does a guy want to be a high school coach? You want to be a college coach? I'd say if you want to be a college coach and you want to make a living at it, do whatever you can to get into Division I, because your chances of, even if you want to be a Division III coach eventually or Division II, the more you can affiliate yourself with top programs, top coaches in known schools, your resume is going to be more impressive. And it really helps, let's face it, to have played at a big time program and have a name. For example, Bobby Hurley, I always knew once he turned to coaching, he was going to advance quickly because he's Bobby Hurley. You are, as a college coach, part of the entertainment division of the university, football and basketball coach. And as such, having a name, having a certain charisma, whatever, is a big advantage. Having played at Villanova or Syracuse, it's a huge advantage. The guy that comes out of, some small school nobody has heard of, it happens, but that guy has got a massive climb. And at some point, somebody's got to give him a shot at a Division I or an NBA team. It's really hard. I know young people that they've been 6, 7, 8 years in Division II and Division III. Their prospects of ever advancing are, every year it gets harder and harder. You got to get very lucky. You got to be good, but you also have to be lucky. And it does help to have played at a high level or been affiliated with programs at a high level. in my opinion.
I mean, I think you said it, there is a lot of luck that goes involved. A lot of luck too when you get into the tournament and things like that too. It's not always the best team, so.
But you got to hustle. It's not even just the job you're doing. You got to hustle with the connections and the contacts of the people that you have, and you do a little something for this guy, they do a little something for you, and they keep that in mind. You help them. But don't you think though that just honesty and integrity really take you a long way? In that profession.
Well, when I look back, I was fortunate we had 5-star camp back in the day because I worked there as a counselor and played there.
Right.
Right away you had a guy like Howie Garfinkel that would recommend you. You had those connections. Certainly, what you're saying about the integrity, that's a given. But you still got to have the introductions. You got to know people. Coaches hire people they know. You're not really getting hired off a resume. So you got to develop a network. Playing for Gary Williams was a big help because he could recommend me. Tom Davis, obviously being with Al, getting to Boston College and having an AD like Gene DiFilippo was tremendously helpful to me. So, it's those connections and personal relationships for a lot of us that allow us to advance.
That's what puts this whole show together.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what we do here at the Big East Rewind, Tim. We're constantly trying to network and talking to people, and so we know exactly what you're talking about. It's the younger generation that is working on those skill sets, and you don't get that by looking at your cell phone or your laptop. You get that by actually having a conversation. So,
and I also tell
right.
Any young guy wants to coach, save your money so that you can make some decisions like maybe work for free, volunteer, find a way to get in the door. Because, most of your best opportunities a lot of times in coaching might be volunteer or pay next to nothing. You look at the guy who gets in the film room in the NBA or takes a low-level position just to make some contacts. A lot of those guys ultimately turn out to be pretty successful.
Yeah,
remember limited earnings coach in college?
What's that?
Go ahead, Sonny.
Remember the limited earnings coach in college? Yeah. Remember that title?
Another lawsuit the NCAA lost.
Limited earnings. Oh, okay. Yeah. That basically means well below minimum wage.
Yeah. No, that was...
Well, Coach, we're going to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was great.
We had a great time talking to you and learning all about your career and your coaching wherever you coached. And, it was great. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it, guys. All right,
Appreciate
thank you.
You've been listening to and watching the Big East Rewind. The Big East Rewind was produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney and our good friends at Boundless Ventures. And we are dropping shows every Wednesday, and we are expanding our outlook on social media. You can see us anywhere on social media by putting Big East Rewind in the search bar, and we'll come up. You can watch the show on YouTube if you put in Big East Rewind in the space bar, and you can also listen to it wherever you get your podcast. And of course, we ask you to like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that bell so you get notified when the next episodes drop. We'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining us. Have a great time.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all.